Hello guys, and we're here today with another very interesting deck provider. Here today we have some Qliphorts. Yes, some Qliphorts. This is a actually pretty good deck, this format. I actually enjoy this deck. As a person that likes control decks, as a person that likes stun decks, this deck is honestly pretty surprisingly good because it has a good offensive capabilities, being able to go for your trigger summons, your pendulum plays, and just summon out some really strong monsters. And it has some great control and stun plays with your trap cards, with all these different floodgates that are in the deck. It's very great, very strong, and if you're looking for maybe a cheap deck or you just don't want to play any of those meta decks, this is a great deck. So let's just go in. We're playing 3 Monolith. Monolith is great. Just being able to draw more cards during your end phase sets you up for next turn, gets you to even more cards, even more floodgates. Very, very great. But do note that those cards you draw are nothing more than an empty threat. If your opponent can make a huge play, if your opponent can do something, we're not running any hand traps in this deck, so they're completely free to do it despite those cards that you just drew, those 1, 2, 3 cards you just drew. But if they can't go for game, if they can't make a big play, then those cards are a threat to them. Scout is amazing. Just pay 800, search for any monster in this deck. You want to get to him as quickly as you can. That's why we're playing 3 Summoner Art and then 3 Duality on top of our 3 card Demise. So you should be able to see him. I'd say the latest is probably your 4th turn, 4th, 5th turn, you should have Scout by now. If you don't, then you're in a very bad situation. But sometimes you can wait out those bad situations if you have a good combination of floodgates. And you just also happen to have like a couple good monsters. And then Skybase is amazing. I don't know if other Qli players run him, but being able to be unaffected by level 8s and lower is pretty strong. And of course he's unaffected by spell and trap cards. His summon can of course still be negated, but his effect cannot be negated by strike, so that's pretty good. And his effect is to take control of one monster your opponent controls until the end phase sees a change of heart, so pretty strong. Just plop him down, and then so you tribute 3 monsters for him. If you have Monolith, you draw 3 cards from your end phase, but then you get another monster your opponent has, which is pretty strong, which is pretty great. So it's really only like 2 cards you're losing to summon them out. And I do want to point out a ruling. If you have like Gozen or Rivalry and your opponent has a different type or a different attribute monster, you can still take control of that monster, but it just gets sent to the graveyard. It'll hit your field and then immediately be sent to the graveyard, which arguably can be better, because if you can't go for game, then at least you can use him to get rid of an opponent's monster where it's not considered destroyed. So that can be really strong. Of course, like Dante and the Burning Abyss monsters, they should be getting their effects, but Breaker, the Phantom Knight monster, he won't get his effect to summon out Phantom Knights. So boom, attack directly and don't have to deal with him floating. Stealth is stealth, just being able to bounce a card to your opponent's hand, or bounce any card on the field to the hand. And of course, no cards can be responded, or your opponent cannot activate cards in response to him. So that's very strong, very great play. I like him a lot. I like Shell better than Disc, because I don't really want to summon out monsters. Much like the deck thinning is of course pretty nice with this, but I like Shell with his piercing, and his attacking twice can be very nice and just very useful. While Shell summons out more 2 monsters and technically has more attack than Disc summons out more monsters and has technically more attack than Shell. If you can dilute those 2 monsters' attack, I'd rather have it all in one, because if your opponent has a monster that has 2,000 defense, you only get inflict 36, which should be the exact amount if you attack with Shell. So pretty much, if you want to play Disc, play Disc. But I like Shell. Helix and Carrier, these are the guys you want to tribute. We're only wanting 2, probably should be running 3, but I don't want to draw into them when I have card Demise out. So he'll pop back row and tribute, and he'll bounce monsters when tributed. So definitely very good monsters to see very early on. And then Regeki, of course, allows us to go for game pretty much. Card of Demise is Card of Demise, just being able to draw 3 cards from your deck is amazing. Upstart. Summoner's Art is amazing, just allowing us to get to our good scales, our vanillas, and yeah, just even more deck thinning. And then Duality, just run through your deck, get to either your floodgates, either the best floodgate, or get to your Starlight Roads if there's a card that you do want to get to, or maybe get to your Summoner's Art or your Scout. And then Twin Twister is Twin Twister. We do have to deal with back row strike, warning, strike. Those cards are still a thing. Unfortunately, this deck just doesn't have any very good discards. You're going to have to discard a card that you really don't want to, such as maybe a Duality or a Regeki or an Upstart. Upstart wouldn't be too bad to discard. Or maybe you have to discard a Qliphort monster. That sucks. But you're going to have to do it because there aren't anything that's really good, and I wouldn't recommend sending any of your trap cards unless like you have like a dead soul turnover. Sacrifice a sacrifice. The monster gains 300 attack, can't be destroyed by battle, treated as 2 tributes. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to search for a Qli monster. So it's kind of like an empty threat to your opponent. Oh, if you get rid of this monster, I'm going to get Scout next turn. So yeah, have fun with that. And so definitely very strong. And of course, this allows us to make our plays even better. To summon out our stealth or sky-based even easier. Bottomless Trap Hole is Bottomless Trap Hole. Same with Compulse. There's 2 great stun cards that I really like. I didn't want to play Solemn Strike or Solemn Warning because we're already paying 800 for Scout. So I figured that these would be 2 good cards to run. If you wanted to, Vanity's Emptiness is also another very good card that you could throw in here. That's a Floodgate. That honestly would not be a bad card. But I like having 2 just good solid stun cards. Starlight Road is Starlight Road. You're probably not going to be able to summon out Stardust Dragon because, of course, the Qliphort monsters in the Pendulum Zone. But you can still negate. You can still negate Twin Twister and different things that your opponent tries to do to get rid of your back row. And so it's definitely a card that I like because if your opponent does have Twin Twister, this card is really, really good because it's pretty much you win the game at that point because your opponent just used 2 cards. If they're going second, they now only have 4 cards in their hand. You still have your Floodgates, and your Floodgates can get rid of so many different cards. And especially if they're face down, because then your opponent makes a play because they're done with what you have face down, and then you flip up like a Goza match. It's like, oh, I have out Dante and I have out High Speed Riders. I have to choose between Light and Wind, and they chose choose Light, and then they can't summon out any of their Burning Abyss monsters or any of their Phantom Knight monsters. So having Starlight Road really strong, just being able to protect. And if you do get to summon out Stardust Dragon, it's not the worst thing in the world. Of course, it can mess with you if you have Gozen or Rivalry, because then you wouldn't be able to summon out your monsters, and you can't tribute Stardust Dragon to summon out these guys, even if you could get out another monster. And so it kind of sucks, but Starlight Road, for the most part, just great. Defending your back row and protecting your scouts as well, because they might hit scout. Soul Turnover is Soul Turnover. It can be a dead card late game, but it's supposed to be a card you see early game to allow you to get to your dualities, get to your card of demise, get to your whole bunch of stuff, because this should be a +1. It's either going to be a 0 or +1, because you're going to be tributing if you tribute these 3 cards for it, it's going to be a 0. You're going to use 2 cards to draw 2 cards. If you tribute Helix or Scout, Carrier, it's going to be a +1 because Helix will then pop back row and Carrier will bounce a monster. So that gets rid of one of your opponent's card on top of the fact that you just drew 2 cards for 2 cards. So pretty fair. And of course you can always pendulum summon these guys back. Compulse, like I already mentioned, lose one turn is honestly a pretty great card in this deck. It will put your pendulum monsters that you pendulum summoned in defense position, which kind of sucks, but we're going for our tribute summons that are important plays. And so we really don't care too much about that. It's really more for opponent because then it slows them down as well, and we want to slow the game state. The slower the game state, the better. And so definitely very useful. Lose one turn, like it's a really strong card, but only a couple of decks can really make use of it. And Qliphort is one of those decks. Qliphort and like your Senju are the 2 decks that can really abuse this card. Goes in match and rivalry, control 1 type or control 1 attribute. Type attribute goes in as the attribute one. And so really strong plays just against the entire format, like against Cosmos. Having these guys out, you can only control psychic, so they can't summon out their ships. and they can only control lights or darks. So if you're facing against monarchs, same thing, you can only control light or dark. Summon out idea, flip any one of those 2 cards, and they can't summon out either of those, and now they just lost their normal summon. And of course they can't tribute monsters, like they can't tribute idea to summon out Erebus, because they can only control 1 attribute and they can't summon anything else. So it's kind of like our version of Mask of Restrict, but also useful against other decks this format, including Pendulums as well, because it prevents them from making different XZ songs like Castell or 101, or just all these different XZ monsters such as Utopia the Lightning, which they will make against this deck because it's practically the only XZ monster that can really do something against this deck. And so goes in, and Rivalry is very useful. And then Skill Drain, I see this card like it's at 3, but it is definitely very useful because you still want to go for tribute summons. You won't get that off of the effects, of course. You'll get off these effects, Carrier and Helix, but you want to go for tribute summons to draw, of course. And just being able to pendulum summon monsters that have 28 and 2400 attack is just really strong. Honestly, really strong. And of course, your opponent being under Skill Drain is extremely annoying. Just do note with Skybase, if this card is already face up on the field, and then you summon Skybase, his effect will be negated. If you flip this after you summon out Skybase, it will not be, and that's the type of scenario you want it to do. But you use Skill Drain when you need to use Skill Drain. If your opponent activates effect you don't like, use Skill Drain. But I will pop Skill Drain using Helix for either Stealth or Skybase, because at that point it's probably late game, and I mean you get a bouncer card with Stealth, so you do have to change chain order. You do have to put this guy as the highest chain order, which means your opponent will be able to respond to him, not him. But if they did have something, like if they had Breakthrough Skill or something, they could go, oh, he's going to pop Skill Drain, so that way he can use Stealth, so he can bounce my monster. I'm going to just use Breakthrough Skill to negate that. So they could, but nonetheless, if it goes through, you got rid of a card, you probably also tributed Carrier, so you got rid of another card that could be 2 monsters, you could be attacking directly. And if you have like another monster, even better. And if you're summoning out Skybase, and of course you get a bouncer card, maybe pop 2 back row or bounce 2 monsters, or maybe you tribute to one of these guys. Skybase, and then being able to take a monster, you should be able to go for game at that point. You should, because you have Skybase, you have one of your opponent's monsters, unless of course you have Rivalry or goes in out. You bounced another one of your opponent's monsters, you should not have to deal with back row at that point. Again, he's unaffected by back row, so you're going to make a direct attack, and by that point it's late game. Both players are probably within the 5,000s or lowers, so it's not a bad idea to pop Skill Drain if you can go for game with Skybase or with Stealth. And so that is it pretty much for the Qliphort deck. This extra deck is pretty much not important. Like the only monsters we even care about here are Infinity, number 38, and Utopia the Lightning. If you can make them, it might not be a bad idea, but you probably can't, so don't even worry about it. So yeah, that's it for this deck. It's a very strong deck. I recommend trying it out and playing it. If you're looking for something new, something different, go ahead and try an older deck. You'll be surprised, and this honestly isn't that old, and it's still really strong. So, hope you guys enjoyed this deck. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys later. Bye.